discuss your rhodophytes or your red algae. That's why I'm using a red marker here. But anyway, so in terms of the basis of classification for your rhodophytes, they are usually lumped together or grouped together or clustered together with your glaucophytes and your chlorophyta. Because first of all, they, just like them, they have a chloroplast envelope that is double membrane. And usually they don't have your chloroplast ER. This is because your glaucophytes, your chlorophytes, and your rhodophytes are a result of primary endosymbiosis. The origin of their chloroplast comes from primary endosymbiosis of a cyanobacteria or a cyanobacteria lookalike that was eaten by a eukaryote heterotrophic organism, and it did not digest it, and eventually it became the plastid for this organism. So usually in most tree of life, your glycophytes, your rhodophytes, and your chlorophytes are lumped together with each other. So they share a very distinct characteristics with your cyanophytes and your glaucophytes, simply because of the presence of phycobiliproteins inside their or in close association with their plastids. Just like most algae species, they all have chlorophyll A that is present in their chloroplast, and their main storage product is released in the cytoplasm. Your rhodophytes is unique in most primary endosymbiosis derived algae in the sense that they don't have any flagella and centrioles in all stages of your life cycle, unlike your chlorophytes and your glaucophytes. Aside from that, they also produce Floridian starch in their cytoplasm. They thylakoid also occur singly in their chloroplast. So I just want you to remember this figure right here from Patrick Killing. And as you recall, they are of a primary endosymbiotic event because again, remember, we have a cyanobacteria that was eaten by a heterotrophic eukaryotic organism, and eventually it became enslaved inside it did not get to be digested inside the cell, but instead it developed to become the plastid of your organism. Again, your glaucophyte is a transitionary organism. Your red algae and your green algae are both the same in the sense that they have the same number of membrane in their plastids. They both have two membrane. Your glaucophyte has three membrane with the peptidoglycan cell wall of the cyanobacteria being retained since it's postulated to be a transitional organism or transitional individual in the evolution of plastid in most eukaryotes. So yeah, primary endosymbiosis. In terms of their diversity and form, your rhodophytes are the most numerous algae species out there, or algae clade out there, comprising of about 6,000 described species to about 10,000 described species worldwide. Most rhodophytes are of marine origin, and only about 200 species are classified or exclusively classified living under freshwater condition. They are morphologically or cytologically diverse in the sense that there are unicellular to multicellular forms. And when you compare the diversity of your rhodophytes with your fungi and your green algae plus the charophytes and all of those angiosperms combined, your rhodophytes are a very divergent clade or group. Just look at among itself you can find a high degree of divergence among them, relative, no, if not equal to the degree of divergence in your fungi and your green plants in your angiosperm. So when you look at the phylogenetic tree of most rhodophyte, you can see a very large fan. No, para siyang malalaking fan, alluvial fans of species. So yeah, they are a very divergent form of organism. In terms of distribution, they can be found in all latitudes. So they can be found on the polar region. They can also be found on the subtropical region, to the temperate region, and the tropical region. But most of them are very abundant on the tropics and temperate regions. But when compared to your green and brown algae, your in terms of their presence and abundance on subpolar and polar region, your rhodophytes has a very low or very less abundant in these regions of the world. But they are dominating, they are the predominant species in your tropics and the temperate region. When comparing the species in your tropical area, usually these are the much smaller representatives, while the organism, the rhodophytes in the temperate regions, I don't know, is this due to the coldness or the slowness of metabolism in those cold regions? But in the temperate regions, they are much bigger and they have a bigger talus in those regions. In the tropics, they are smaller, but usually their cytomorphological form is of a filamentous algae. Ayan pa lang siya. Binanggit siya dyan. Okay. So, in terms of, when comparing to your green algae and brown algae, your rhodophytes has the ability to occupy a greater depth or a deeper regions of your euphotic zone in your, for example, if you imagine your water column right here, you have your euphotic zone. This is the zone where your light can penetrate. And again, in the deeper portion of your deep sea, for example, you can't see light, no? Meaning your light can only penetrate up to a certain portion of your deep sea. Now, your green algae and your brown algae can only occupy certain regions of your euphotic zone. But your red algae, thanks to certain adaptive measures inside them, no, like the presence of phycobilisome, they can occupy even greater depths and evolve in those certain niche of your euphotic zone of our deep sea, of our pelagic areas in the ocean. So yeah, the presence of your phycobilisome and their relative phycobili proteins are provide, no, a significant adaptive advantage to your red algae, making them able to utilize wavelengths of light that are able to further penetrate the euphotic zone of your water column, the deeper water column. Now, in terms of their basic cellular structure, they look something like this. So this case here is a Porphyridium cruentum, and this figure right here is an SEM of, or TEM of your Rhodelia violacea. So let's look at them in terms of what they look like in terms of their cell wall. So in terms of cell wall component, again, we have your amorphous and your fibrillar component. In their fibrillar component, most rhodophytes are made up of cellulose. Although some groups or some representatives, like for example, the haploid base of your order Bangiales, their matrix is made up of silates. In terms of their amorphous component, they're mainly made up of your polysaccharide mucilages, like your agar and your carrageenans. These are the famous one, no? These are just simply put, these are sugar molecules, no? Na kakaiba yung itsura, mga galactose-ish na mga molecules yan. But yeah, or kamukha ni galactose. And then kakaiba lang yung mga bound yung mga glycosidic linkages niya mga yan. But yeah, these are the one that we use to culture microorganism, the agar, and in our agar plates, right? In our agar culture, yung mga pinag-iistrikan natin dito sa laboratory. And yeah, kasi yun din ang kagandahan sa kanila. Because 70% of these mucilages makes up the entirety of your the dry weight of your cell wall. So napakalaking porsyento ng mucilages na yan ay gawa nung mucilage na yan ay gawa sa agar at carrageenan. Kaya madaling ma-extract, no? Yun yung kagandahan. So it's a good source of agars and carrageenans, yung mga mucilaginous or amorphous components ng ating mga rhodophytes. So, magandang source of income para sa Pilipinas. Anyway, your rhodophytes also has a certain degree of cell wall calcification. And in terms of the evolutionary timescale, the evolution of cell wall calcification happened first in some representative of your algal lineages, of your Rhodophyta lineages. So it's one of the distinguishing features of your rhodophytes. Okay, so as you can see here, there's a high degree of calcification in some representative of your rhodophyte lineages. Mainly your corallinales and your nemaliales groups. In most corallinales, kaya nga sila corallinales because they are what we call hard red algae or hard algae representatives because of the high degree of calcification of their cell wall. So, paano yung calcification na to? Essentially, you have calcium carbonate na dinedeposit externally in the cell wall of your red algae. And this comes usually in two forms. We have calcite and we have aragonite crystals. Pag calcite, usually that is the one that we can find in your corallinales group. And when we look at aragonite, it is usually found in your nemaliales group. So, ganito yung mga itsura nila, no? Para siyang rectangular yung isa ay parang diamond shape na ewan. That's your calcites, and that's your aragonite. And why are we talking about this? Because these features are important in their identification. Yan nga, sabi natin, pag aragonite yung nakikita, nemaliales yan. Pag calcite yung nakikita, corallinales yan. And also, in terms of the paleontological studies that we can conduct on your, for example, the sediment basin, ocean sediment basin. Pag mas madami ka nakikitang aragonite or kapag mas madami ka nakikitang calcite, that would infer the presence or abundance or diversity of your corallinales or your nemaliales representative. But again, these are not the only animals that can produce these crystals, these calcium carbonate crystals, okay? So they also have what we call rhodoliths or parang red rocks or red rocks because it is found on your red algae. But your rhodoliths are this unattached biogenic nodules that is again composed of partly calcified red algae. So rhodoliths, ito yung mga parang red algae rocks, kumbaga. Okay, so parang mga nodules that is made up of this calcified red algae. So makikita natin yan sa mga ocean sediments natin, for example. Aside from that, ito na yung sinasabi kong paleontological implications of the presence of aragonite and calcite in our ocean sediments. So, scientists found out and they can infer the abundance of certain organisms, of certain groups of algae, when they look at your core or sediment cores of your oceans. So say for example, when you have in those sediment cores, you have a high degree of calcite aragonite, that would also mean that your sea is can be considered a calcite sea or an aragonite sea, or it can be inferred that in this time or in this point of our life history in the geological time scale, certain groups of these algae are more abundant or more diverse in that era. So when they look at the sediment core of your ocean, they can track which group is more abundant based on the presence or absence or the levels of calcite aragonite or the levels of your magnesium calcium chemicals or elements in your sediment core basins. So it's a very interesting field in paleontology and in geology. Okay, so that's the implication in terms of the diversity and abundance. Now we go to, so tapos na tayo kay cell wall, we go to your chloroplast. So pangalawa to si chloroplast. Hindi natin na numberan. Lagyan lang natin ng number. Sorry. Yan. Cell wall. Okay. Ayan, balik na tayo kay chloroplast. Now, when we're talking about chloroplast, there are at least two common forms of chloroplast predominant in your rhodophyte lineages. The first one is what we call a stellate chloroplast, in which it looks like a star. So, mag-drawing tayo ng star. If you can imagine a star there, ayan, may star kasi, no? Kailangan nyo lang expand yung imagination nyo. Pero there's a star there. So, i-drawing natin. So, ito yung ulo ng star. Ito yung isa pa. Isa yung dalawang paa. Yung dalawang kamay. So, may star ka. That's your stellate. No? Stellate type of chloroplast. And meron naman tayo yung simple lang na discoid type of chloroplast na mas prevalent sa mga advanced form. So, ito. Again, I'm putting it out there na through care, at the back of our mind, we should know that when Sir Patrick says primitive, advanced, I am talking in a gradistic manner, and I know that this is bad, but for the sake of simplicity of our discussion, I'm doing it. But you kind of get the point later on. But what I mean by that is when you look at the evolutionary advancement of structures in terms of your forms of chloroplasts, usually your stellate forms are the more primitive. So primitive to. And your discoid type, yung ganito yung tsura, these are more advanced form. And yung isa pang titingnan natin dito is the presence of what we call pyrenoid. When you have pyrenoids, so pag may pyrenoid ka, usually that is the advanced form. Pag you don't have a pyrenoid, those organisms are the more primitive ones. So, again, these are generalization, and it's a good generalization because you can kind of see where these organisms can be put in that timeline, or where these organisms can be put in the transitionary or in the more advanced state of your very divergent or very fan-like lineage that is your Rhodophyta. So it is good to do it in this portion of a lecture, to use primitive, advanced, because we can see the gradistic incremental changes that your organism took in their evolutionary history. Now, again, we mentioned earlier that their chloroplast has two membranes. So they have a two-membrane chloroplast, They don't have a chloroplast ER. Again, primary endosymbiosis yung origin ng kanilang chloroplast. Their thylakoids occur singly. And usually, the surface of your thylakoids are lined with what we call your phycobilisomes. And the most common pigment that we can find is your chlorophyll A, phycocyanins, phycoerythrines that are related to your, are closely associated with your phycobilisomes. Now, there are 5 types of your phycobilins in your rhodophyte representatives. We have your R phycocyanin, we have allo phycocyanin, B phycoerythrine, R phycoerythrine, and C phycoerythrine. Your phycocyanin, these ones are usually the what we call the greenish. Usually their color is greenish to blue in coloration, while your phycoerythrine, kasi nga erythrine, diba, red blood cells, these are more of a red to an orange tinge yung kanilang kulay. Now, this is because your chloroplast or this organism exhibit what we call complementary chromatic adaptation. This is a very important topic in your adaptation of pigments in your chloroplast, especially the ones that are associated with your phycobilisomes, that enhances or makes the capturing of light rays very efficient. So again, remember, we have a water column right here. So my water, we have a, so yeah, no? This is a water column. Mas malalim yung nasa baba, mas mababaw yung nasa taas. Andito si Haring Araw. Again, your sunlight will give off different wavelengths of light. Diba? Andyan yung mga different wavelengths of light natin. Again, yung rays of our sun, ang pag-isip nyo naman dyan ay wave man siya or particle man siya, magpe-penetrate siya dun sa ating tubig. But, may certain portion lang ng tubig na nape-penetrate ni light, no? Ang tawag natin sa portion na yan ay photic or euphotic zone. So, dyan lang sa region na yan, magpe-penetrate si light. Ngayon, sabihin natin sa organism, meron tayong organism A. So, ayan yung light nagpe-penetrate. May organism B tayo dito. Organism A, organism B is right here. Sa ating euphotic zone, no? Nasa euphotic zone tayo. Ngayon, ang tendency kasi ng wavelengths of light, no? Usually, ang wavelengths of light natin, we have Rhodophyta, for example. Doon lang tayo sa visible wavelength of light. Pero kasi yun lang usually yung na-utilize, no? Ng karamihan sa mga algae. So, meron tayong Rhodophyta or Rhodophyta. So, red, orange, yellow, yun yung mas shorter wavelength, 'di ba, yung red. Yun yung mas longer yung wavelength, 'di ba? Kaya nga kapag gabi, yun yung nakikita natin na kulay reddish to orange, or kapag sisikat yung araw, reddish to orange. So yun yung mga longer wavelength. So meron kang red, orange, and yellow. Tapos green, blue, and violet, no? Roy BV. Okay, may indigo pa yung iba na sinasabi, pero yan lang yung kailangan natin dito. Ngayon, itong red, orange, and yellow wavelength, these are the longer wavelengths of light, and your green, parang yun yung parang in the middle, and your blue and your your blue and your violet, these are the shorter, diba? Shorter wavelength of light. Ngayon, diba? So, ibig sabihin, kung titingnan natin yung amplitudes and yung crest or yung trough, diba? Crest to crest, trough to trough ng mga wavelengths of light na yan, yung ating Roy, si red, orange, and yellow, ganyan yung itsura, for example. Again, this is a very, hindi mo makikita yan na ganyan, nakalaki. Medyo malaki yan. Pero, para ma-visualize lang natin, i-drawing natin ng ganyan. Now, dun sa blue and violet, mas mga ganito naman yung wavelength of light na makikita nyo. Mas shorter yung wavelength. Dito, mas longer yung wavelength natin or yung distance with trough to trough or crest to crest. Now, ano implication yan sa atin? Alam natin from our physics that usually your shorter wavelength of light has more energy in them. And therefore, they can penetrate deeper or further into your water column. So, ibig sabihin, mas makaka-penetrate yung blue and violet. So, what I want you to know here is that in your deeper regions of your euphotic zone, where your light can penetrate, only your blue and your violet wavelength of your visible spectrum can penetrate. So, ibig sabihin, dun sa organism B, ang makikita lang niyo dyang light is the blue and violet na spectrum. But si organism A, makikita niya dyan yung, makikita niya lahat yung kulay, pero mas predominant na makikita niya is si red, orange, and yellow, yung longer wavelength of light. And usually, ang nakita ng mga scientists natin is that when your organism is exposed to the upper portion of your deep sea, no? Pag mas dito sila sa surface lang makikita, ang ginagawa nila is they produce phycocyanin. So, phycocyanin yung pinoproduce ng mga to. So, phycocyanin ang pinoproduce ni organism A. Kasi, ang mas nakikita niya is yung orange and red light na nag-stimulate ng pag-produce ng mga phycocyanin. At itong mga phycocyanin na to, ang ina-absorb nila is yung mga longer wavelength of light na usually si red, orange, and yellow. But, kapag yung organism mo, like organism B, that is located in a deeper portion of your euphotic zone, usually, ang pinuproduce naman niya is yung mga phycoerythrin. At si phycoerythrin, ang ginagawa naman nito, ang mas ina-absorb niya, is yung mga shorter wavelength of light. Okay, yung mga shorter wavelength of light yung na-absorb ng mga phycoerythrin natin. Kasi ito lang yung nakaka-penetrate sa deeper portion of your water column. Okay? So, yun lang yun naman yung complementary chromatic adaptations ng ating mga Rhodophyta. Ngayon, bakit ko sinasabi to? Remember that the presence of your phycocyanin and your phycoerythrins and their close association with your phycobilisome is important. No? It is very important in their survival, especially in deeper portion of your water or the deeper portion of the deep sea. In the deeper portion of your water column. So, very important yan. So, they have this complementary chromatic adaptation kasi nga, yung certain portion lang ng wavelength of light, yung kaya makapag-penetrate further down your water column. So, it's important na kapag deeper ka, si phycoerythrin yung ipoproduce mo, kapag nasa topmost portion ka, phycocyanin yung ipoproduce mo. So, ayan, no? So, hindi ito parang yung color theory natin ng elementary. No, na meron kang color mixing ng crayons mo. So, hindi ibang rules to. No? Ito na yung rules na ginagamit natin with referring dun sa light. No? Si white light, andyan lahat ng color. So, pwede mong ma-breakdown yan into the different colors that you have. Diba? Pag dinifract mo yon, although tatlong kulay lang naman, okay ka na. Pag-produce ka na ng white light. Anyway, yun yung P6100 nyo. And I hope naaalala nyo pa yan. Si light. Now, your complementary chromatic adaptation, ayan, kung makikita nyo, can be seen on certain organism like your Capopicus. Ayan. So, ganyan yung kulay niya kapag deeper. And usually, kapag nasa mas mataas siyang lugar, iba din yung kulay niya. Okay? So, yeah. Now, in terms naman of the presence of different storage product inside your organism, so ito ay si number 3 na, di ba? So, in terms of the presence of storage products, usually, the photosynthetates that are produced during photosynthesis, malamang, is in the form of what we call fluoridoside. So this is the most common product among Rhodophyta representative of photosynthesis. Now, when your fluoridoside is transported, no, in the cytosol, of your organism, they become or they became the Floridian starch form. So this is the most common naman na form of storage sugar inside the cytosol or the cytoplasm of your organism. So, fluoridoside, kapag tinransport, papunta sa cytosol, Floridian starch na. And meron din silang other sugar forms. But usually, itong mga sugar forms na to is yung tinatawag nating sugar alcohol. So, your sugar alcohol comes in the form of sorbitol, mannitol, and dulcitol. Ito yung mga naririnig nyong mga sugar alcohol din, no? Kapag sa mga sipilyo. I mean, sa toothpaste nyo, sa Colgate, or sa Fresh, mga ganyan. So, yan yung mga sugar alcohol na present doon. Kaya pwede nyo din silang pag-extrakan, no? Utilitarian talaga kasi tayo. Now, next is yung ating pit connection. So, number 4. So, pag sinabi naman nating pit connections, ito na yung kakaibang features ng mga red algal cells natin. But sometimes, hindi ito lagi present. Like, for example, in your Porphyridiales, walang mga pit connections yung mga yan. At yung mga haploid bases ng ating order Bangiales. So, ano nga ba yung ating pit connection? So, your pit connection ay hindi talaga siya pit at hindi din siya connection talaga, no? Para siyang misnomer, kumbaga. Pero yun yung tawag sa kanya. Pero it's not a pit, it's not a connection, it's just there to provide a structural strength or support for your growing talus, yung lumalaki nating mga talus. Now, some cells use these pit connections in terms of their reproduction. Minsan, yung mga pit connections na to ay nadidislodge din, no? So, parang din siyang nagiging connection na, pero paminsan lang yun, no? Nadidislodge yung mga pit connections na to, yung mga plugs na to allow continuity between the protoplasm of your between cells. Usually, sa mga malalaking talus na mga organism yan. Yung mga flattened, multi-cellular organism. Now, ganito yung itsura nila, no? Usually, yung pit connection mo, pwede siyang maging ganito, na completely open. Yung nga sinabi natin na continuous yung protoplasm nung dalawa. In this case, in this first case right here. Meron din naman tayo kung saan yung ating pit connection is ganito yung itsura. And again, for structural support, parang ine-extend niya further, no? Further extension ng cell wall. Sa inyong pangalawang form. Yung pangatlong form is yung may tinatawag na tayong, kung makikita nyo, ito yung kanyang ER or yung kanyang endoplasmic reticulum and para siyang na-trap dun sa gitna. So that is the trapped ER or trapped endoplasmic reticulum. So yan yung pangatlong form. Yung pang-apat na form, ito yung mas advanced form, kumbaga, ito na yung may tinatawag tayong plug. No? So meron pang structural differences yung plug na yan. Tingnan natin. So, yung pang-apat na yan, ayan, meron tayong tinatawag na proteinaceous plug. Yung proteinaceous plug na yan, it is usually made up of what we call cap membrane. So, meron kang cap membrane dito. So, makikita nyo, this is the cap membrane right here. May inner cap ka, may outer cap ka. But essentially, para kang may cap, no? Dyan sa outer portion. And your inner portion mo, ang tawag naman natin doon is the plug core. So, we have a plug core, the inner portion. And we have an outer cap. Now, in some cases, in some rhodophyte representative, the cap membrane is entirely lost. Or not lost, but it is missing. And usually, when that cap membrane is missing, that would equate to the organism being more primitive. So again, kapag may cap, advanced. Pag walang cap membrane, primitive. So, okay, isulat natin para di tayo malito. So, plus, minus, cap, no cap, no? Yung mga, anyway, lingo na yun. No cap, sir. Anyway, so pag walang cap, kung hindi siya nagsisinungaling, usually, ito yung mas, ito yung mas primitive. Pag may cap, ito yung mga organism na advanced. Again, a little precaution on the use of advanced and primitive. We're using this just for simplicity's sake, and this is not to say that your organism with cap membranes are the better organism, and the organism without a cap are the more advanced or more better. Okay, so again, precaution on the use of primitive and advanced. But I guess from now, alam nyo na yon, no? Na-prime na kayo in that sense. So there are also two types according to the formation, no, that is formed, no, of your pit connection. So meron tayong tinatawag na primary pit field connection. Meron naman tayong secondary pit field connection. Pag sinabi nating primary pit field connection, these are the connection that is usually formed during cell division. That's your primary. Pag secondary pit field division, these are the connection that is usually a resultant when your two cell fuse together. Okay? So pag nag-fuse yung dalawang cell together, that's your secondary. Pag during cell division, no? During cell division siya na-form your primary pit field connection, no? These are your primary pit connections. Now, next, number 5. Again, introduction pa rin tayo ng basic cellular structure, secretory cells. So, what are the different secretory cells that there are? So, meron tayong tinatawag na mga vesicular cells that occur in some representative red algae. So, ano yung importance nito? So, for example, in the case of Bonimasonia, so, kay Bonimasonia, meron siyang mga vesicular cells. At yung mga vesicular cells niya na to ay naglalaman ng high concentration of iodine. Sometimes, not just iodine, but also different gases or different compounds like bromine can be found in those cells, in the mucilages, for example, of certain species. And usually, aside from that, meron din tayong, so may iodine ka na, iodine, bromine, and usually, meron ka ding makikitang acidic polysaccharide or proteinaceous materials inside your cells. And usually, ang purpose ng mga ganitong storage compounds, like your iodine, your bromine, and your acidic polysaccharides, your proteinaceous materials inside your cells, usually, ang purpose niyan is to, one is antibacterial. So again, di ba, kung maalala nyo, during operations, gumagamit tayo ng iodine concentration, di ba, pampatay ng mga bacteria dun sa skin bago tayo mag-cut, di ba, during surgery. So yeah, may antibacterial properties kasi itong iodine and bromine natin. And aside from that, kapag tinikman nyo kasi itong mga to, medyo mapait or mapakla siya. Kaya in a way, nag-a-act siya as anti-herbivory. No? So ayan, sinabi pala dyan, herbivory deterrence. So kasi medyo astringent yung taste ng mga compounds na yan. Lalo na yung mga iodine, yung mga acidic polysaccharides na yan, yung mga proteinaceous materials na yan inside your vesicular cell. Next, na i-discuss natin is yung certain uncanny iridescence of certain groups of red algae. So, what do we mean by iridescence? Again, i-define lang natin na mabilis. When we say iridescence, this is luminescence, no? Luminescence siya. So, para siyang umiilaw. Pero hindi talaga siya umiilaw. So, yung iridescence na to, kailangan mo ng light para umilaw siya. Usually, dahil lang yan sa arrangement ng physical molecules mo. No? Like for example, dun sa mga wings ng butterfly natin. No? Meron silang certain pattern, molecular pattern, or physical pattern dun sa kanilang scales ng wings nila. Kaya siya kapag finlashlightan mo ay parang umiilaw. So, iridescence yung tawag natin doon. Not to be confused with what we call phosphorescence and bioluminescence. Itong mga to, talagang chemical light, may chemical reaction ka na nagpo-produce or nagre-release ng visible light, no? So, pag phosphorescence, usually, di ba, may ano ka dyan, chemical na pinagmimix to release light. Pag bioluminescence naman, like in your firefly, may chemicals ka din, no? Na luciferase na nag-interact doon at, through energy, nagpo-produce ng light. But this is different. Nagpuproduce talaga ng light yung phosphorescence activity natin and bioluminescence, mga chemoluminescence activity na yan, compared to your iridescence na kailangan mo ng light source para umilaw. Ibig sabihin yan, kapag iridescent lang yung organism mo, tapos nilagay mo sa dilim, hindi yan iilaw. Yung phosphorescent na na chemicals at yung mga bioluminescent organism, iilaw yan. So again, ganun lang, no? Dinefine lang natin. Now, some red algae kasi show this distinct iridescence in their, usually in their cell covering. So usually, yung mga red algae na to, kahit red algae sila, nagmumukha silang blue or green through physical interference of light waves. So through iridescence. So dahil nire-reflect nila yung light to a certain way, nagkukulay blue sila at nagkukulay green sila. Although red algae pa rin yung mga to. Dahil naman to sa presence ng tinatawag nating iridescent body, or minsan dahil sa kakaibang multi-layer cuticle nila. So para siyang minsan sa loob nila, so may cell ka kunwari, sa loob nila may mga refractive or may mga compounds ka na iridescent bodies yung tawag natin doon na nire-reflect yung light to a certain way. Na makikita mo tuloy na nagsashine siya na blue or green. Minsan naman, dahil sa layer of cuticle nila, no, dahil sa certain arrangement, iba-bounce off yung light, so hindi lagi siya na-absorb. Some are reflected na visible light na makikita natin. So that's your iridescence. Now moving on to what we call epiphytes and parasites. There are certain organism na epiphytic o yung kumakapit-kapit sa mga halaman. So talamak yan sa ating mga red algae. Meron din naman tayo mga parasitic din na form ng red algae. So tingnan natin yung mga yan. Okay. So kung makikita nyo dito, sabi niya, most species naman talaga of red algae are autotrophic, meaning they can produce their own food, they are photosynthetic, just like your Miss-Independent na mga plant, no? Miss-Independent na kanta. Kung I'm old, I know. Sorry. Anyway, so that's your autotrophic, just like your plants. But there are other organisms that are not entirely autotrophic, but they are heterotrophic in nature. The entire opposite, no, of your autotrophic, kung saan sila ay kumakain ng other organism. So these organisms na usually they are what we call epiphytic in nature, kung saan attached sila. Although I just want to say this now na hindi ibig sabihin epiphytic ka, parasitic ka na, ha. May mga minsan dumidikit lang talaga sila, mga commensal lang sila, pero hindi lagi sila parasitic. Okay? Minsan epiphytic siya pero nagpo-photosynthesize pa rin siya. No? Kumakabit siya dun sa mga blades or sa talus nung mas malaking algae. So para kang may puno din, no? May kumakabit-kabit na kung ano nung epiphytes. But hindi lagi parasitic sila. Ngayon, meron tayong tinatawag na non-obligate epiphytes. When we say non-obligate epiphytes, these are organisms that are freely attached to another algae, but they can also be found freely floating. Okay? Pag sinabi naman nating obligate epiphytes, these epiphytes cannot grow without any host. So, kailangan nilang may kakabitan sila. Kung wala silang kakabitan, they have no chance of living in the outside world. Meron din naman tayong mga semi-parasitic na talagang mga organism. At pag sinabi natin semi-parasitic, ito yung mga facultative parasite. When certain conditions are favorable, they won't choose to be parasitic. But given the chance na wala na silang magawa, they will turn into being a parasite. And meron din tayo mga entirely parasitic na mga organism, kung saan nakadepende yung kanilang existence dun sa presence of their host. They can't live without their host. Again, magkaiba to, ha. So, kumbaga, ayan. So, itong dalawang to, sa taas, si autotrophic at versus heterotrophic, magkaiba yan. Yung epiphytes versus parasite, no? Epiphytes versus parasite, magkaiba. Autotrophic versus heterotrophic, magkaiba yan. Pag parasite, meron pa tayong dalawang klase. Meron kang adelpo parasites, meron kang alloparasite. Pag sinabi nating adelpo, pag narinig nyo yung adelpo na yan, adelpo, hindi yan si Adele, ha? Na, don't you remember? Anyway, pag sinabi mong adelpo parasite, pag narinig mo yung adelpo na yan, usually, para yung magka-related. So, para siyang akin to what we call brotherhood. No? Brother. So, para siyang ka-bro. O, anong ibig sabihin ko pag sinabi kong brother, magka-family or magka-related yung mga organism na nagpa-parasite dun sa isa't isa. Okay? So, ibig sabihin yan, kung wari, magkaparehas na genus sila. No? So, yung parasite mo, ang pinaparasite niya, or ang ina-attack niyang host, yung kamag-anak din niya. Okay? So, yung mga adelpo parasite, yung kamag-anak niya, yung kanyang pinaparasitize. So, pwedeng hindi yan, genus to genus. Pwede mo ma-extend in the family member, in the family na classification. So, pwedeng magka-same family yung pinaparasitize lang niya. Pag sinabi mo namang alloparasite, usually pag sinabi mo, di ba, pag allopatric, mga ganyan speciation, this is usually other. Or parang outside, no? Parang ganon. Or, mas sa atin ngayon, not related. So, ibig sabihin, yung parasite natin, ang pinaparasitize, is organism na hindi niya ka-related. So, maybe different family, or entirely different class of organism. Like, for example, ang pinaparasitize niya yung mga green algae na, no? Yung mga rhodophytes natin na to. Now, yung isa sa mga example natin ng obligate epiphytes is si case ni Polycyphonia on your ascophyllum. So, si ascophyllum dito sa figure na to, ito yung green na yan, no? Yung mas malaking greenish. So, yan si ascophyllum. Si Polycyphonia mo, itong mga red algae na nandito. So, siya ay obligate epiphyte ni ascophyllum. So, si Polycyphonia lanosa, hindi siya mabubuhay kapag hindi siya nakakapit kay ascophyllum. So, ayan siya, no? Talagang nagpe-penetrate siya dyan kay ascophyllum na yan. So, ganyan. Epiphytic talaga yung organism na yan. So, malakas yung kapit niya. Now, an example of a parasitism naman on your red algae, this is the case naman of your Choreocolax polycyphonae. So, siya naman ay isang allopatric, nag-exhibit siya ng alloparasitism. So, siya si Choreocolax. So, ang pinaparasitize niya is yung kanina din na Polycyphonia, but this time, Polycyphonia fastidigitata. So, si Polycyphonia fastidigitata, so ito siya, red algae siya. Tapos, ito naman si Choreocolax natin, na nagfo-form ng parang nodules dyan. Okay, so yung organism mo na yan, nagpo-form siya ng nodules dito, malapit kay Polycyphonia, and pwede mo pang isipin yan na si Polycyphonia ay dahil obligate parasite yan, ay obligate epiphyte, meron ka pa na ascophyllum na green kanina, di ba? Yung mga green na ascophyllum. So, para siyang epiphyte ni ascophyllum, no? So, ito si ascophyllum. So, epiphyte ni ascophyllum, si Polycyphonia, and then si Polycyphonia is pinaparasitize ni Choreocolax. Okay, so yan yung mga examples natin ng epiphytes and parasites. And sometimes, your red algae has different defense mechanism kapag dating dito sa mga epiphytes na ito. Kasi malaking problema talaga, no? Malaking problema. Meron akong isang estudyante noon na ito yung kanyang thesis. Isang group sa amin na ito yung thesis niya. Kasi naging project namin yon nung sa aming micro classes, parang special topics namin, face-to-face pa. But yeah, maingit kayo. But ang ginawa niya is meron siyang mga red algae, and yung mga red algae kasi na to, laging may kung ano-anong tumutubo sa dahon nila. So, kung may mga dahon-dahon ka, may kung anik-anik na tumutubo dyan. So, ang ginawa namin, tinry namin i-isolate yung mga epiphytes na to. Pero nahihirapan kami i-isolate siya. Kasi kailangan mong... Kasi karamihan dito sa mga to, hindi siya mabubuhay na wala yung dahon, no? Kasi para siyang obligate epiphyte. So, may kailangan kaming gawin ng mga run around to culture them in the laboratory. But yeah, in the end, we tried to isolate different compounds na pwedeng makontrol yung overgrowth ng mga yan. Kasi minsan yung mga nag-grow ng mga epiphytes na to is pathogenic din in nature. But yeah, yung epiphytes in nature at lalo na in the benthic habitat of most of your red algae, napaka-susceptible nila into the overgrowth of epiphytes. So isipin nyo, kung may dahon ka, I mean, hindi talaga siya dahon, blade siya kasi hindi siya full-fledged dahon like your plants. But yeah, you have your blade of your algae, of your red algae. Ang tendency ng mga epiphytes is to cap it, and to entirely cover the blade of your red algae. Kapag na-cover na yan, na-outgrowth niya yan, hindi na makakapag-photosynthesize ng maayos yung ating red algae. That's why there are certain groups of red algae too that evolved this different defense mechanism to deter or to prevent the outgrowth of epiphytes. Specifically, the presence or secretion of what we call halogenated furones. So, itong mga halogenated furones na to, usually sinisikret yan ng ating mga, ng ating mga delia, no? At pag nagsikret sila niyan, pinapabagal yan yung pag-grow ng mga epiphytes na to sa kanilang mga photosynthetic part ng kanilang blades. Other production or other substances that they can secrete is what we call hydrogen peroxide. Again, kapag sinabi nating hydrogen peroxide, these are, if you think about it, diba? Remember SOD, superoxide dismutase. Usually, diba sabi natin, meron tayong mga free radicals, tapos nagpo-produce siya ng agua oxinada, the hydrogen peroxide. Toxic pa rin sa hydrogen peroxide, lalo na sa mga bacteria. Kasi yung mga bacteria na to, lalo na yung mga pathogenic bacteria, they live in anoxic condition or very low oxygen concentration. Kasi hindi na nila kayang i-withstand itong mga reactive oxygen species na to. Itong mga reactive oxygen species na to, like this time, although mas lesser yung reaction or yung reactivity ni hydrogen peroxide compared sa other type of reactive oxygen species, but still, nakakapatay siya ng bacteria dahil yung presence ng ating mga hydrogen peroxide molecule, lalo na kapag pinroduce siya na malapit dun sa mucilage ng ating gracilaria, in this case, ang gagawin niyan ay para siyang magiging toxic dun sa cell membrane. Mag-interfere siya sa cell membrane or sa cell wall growth ng ating bacteria. At nakita pa namin nun sa isang thesis students ko nun na nag-work on plasma. May mga plasma, tayo dito, equipment sa UP Baguio. Ginawa namin, we have a plasma gun, para siyang plasma gun, or meron kaming apparatus that emit plasma. Helium-argon plasma. At ang ginawa ng helium-argon plasma, so may bacteria kami dyan. Meron kaming parang apparatus kung saan nagbubuga siya ng plasma. So para siyang plasma pen, no? Pero controlled siya. Yung plasma, pag pwede nyo hawakan yung plasma na to, hindi siya mainit, no? Hindi siya mainit na unlike yung normal na plasma na alam natin, 'di ba? Na napakainit. This is a room temperature plasma. Tapos ang ginagawa nun, dumidikit siya dun sa bacteria. At ang nangyari, yung mga E. coli cells namin dito, talagang nung tinignan namin sa SEM, sira-sira talaga yung cell wall nila. Or hindi sila nakapag-grow entirely dun sa plate namin. So, ang ganda. Ang gandang field of research yan. So, yun, ang ganda. Nasira talaga kahit hindi mainit. No? Hindi mainit siya, guys. Diba? Ang alam natin na pag-control ng mga microorganism is through heating. Diba? Usually, gumagamit tayo ng autoclave, papainitin natin or papakuluan natin yung tubig. But this time, kahit malamig, no, hinahawak-hawakan namin yung plasma na yan, okay lang, napapatay yung mga E. coli cells. Dahil yun ang tineorize namin, dahil yung plasma na to, yung helium-argon plasma namin, nagpo-produce ng reactive oxygen species. Yung reactive oxygen species na yan, they can degrade the cell wall, or interfere with production of cell membrane, or even in the production or the replication of your DNA. Yung mga enzymes din na involved dun sa cellular metabolism, they can also interfere in that, and that causes death of your bacteria. So yeah, ang daming kwento. Nagsimula tayo kay hydrogen peroxide, kay agua oxinada, yung bumubula-bula, yung pinapamumog ni dentist sa atin. Anyway, meron din tayong mga organism, again, si Gracilaria din, nagpuproduce siya ng mga volatile hydrocarbons as biocide, lalo na dun sa mga mucilage part niya. Dun parang sa surface lang niya. So, yung mga volatile hydrocarbons na to, once in contact with your surrounding bacteria, it causes death to them. So, para siyang pesticide or biocide niya. Okay. So, the last one that we will talk about here is your reproduction naman. So, number 9 na to. So, introduction pa rin tayo, but in terms of reproduction na yung pinag-uusapan natin. Now, in terms of reproduction, there are different types of reproductive mechanism that your organism involves. Usually, they have what we call vegetative fragmentation, or yung nagpo-produce sila ng mga spore din. So, minsan nag-undergo sila ng vegetative fragmentation or through spore formation. But most species, ito yung pinaka-unique sa mga organism under your Rhodophytes, they perform what we call the alternation of generation. So, napaka-complex na alternation of generation. Yung iba pa nga, they have at least 3 phases in this complicated life history. So most of your red algae are typically oogamous, kung saan meron kang mas malaki na non-motile egg and meron kang sperm, no? But yung sperm din dito non-motile. You have also a non-motile sperm na mas maliit yung tsura. Now, unique itong presence or the evolution of what we call the triphasic life history in your red algae, because imagine, again, remember your red algae is oogamous, they have an egg, and ang problema kasi nila, yung kanilang sperm, kumbaga, ay immotile, no? So, hindi nakakalangoy or walang flagella yung mga gametes nila. So, to counteract that problem, kasi nga hindi makapag-swim yung kanilang mga gametes, they develop this triphasic life history. So, parang to compensate for an efficient pollination or an efficient fertilization, no? Dahil nga wala silang flagellated na gametes or motile gametes, they develop this very complicated and very complex triphasic life history. Okay, so anong itsura nung kanilang mga sexual reproductive structure? So meron tayong una, tinatawag natin siyang carpogonium. So pag sinabi nating carpogonium, this is the female reproductive organ. Meron kang dalawang part dyan. Meron kang, dun sa female natin reproductive organ, meron kang trichogyne at meron kang basal portion. So si trichogyne natin here, this is your trichogyne. This is the one that receives the sperm. Yeah, that's the one that receives the sperm. We have also the basal portion. So, meron kang basal portion. This portion right here, siya si carpogonium natin. Itong portion na to si trichogyne. Tapos, itong babang ito, itong mga maliliit na cells na nandito, ang tawag naman natin dyan ay, that's your carpogonial branch. So that's your carpogonial branch. Ito naman yung mga malalapit dito, no? Yan yung supporting cells natin. P lang. Ay, dalawang P pa lang supporting. So that's your supporting cells right there. Usually, your carpogonium has two nuclei inside it. So, lagi yung may dalawang nuclei inside it. Minsan, your corpogonial branch is very short or usually, ano lang yan, tatlo to apat na cell structure. Mamaya makikita natin that different groups of organism has different counts of their cell carpogonial branch. Yung mga supporting cells naman natin na to, ito yung nagigive rise dun sa carpogonial branch natin. So, yung mga cells na nandito, sila yung magigive rise dito sa mga carpogonial branch na to. That's your supporting cell. So, meron din tayong spermatangium. So, meron tayong carpogonium, the female organ. Meron tayong spermatangium. This one is the one that produces the spermatium or parang yung sperm, which is usually immotile na sphericals na parang bilog-bilog lang na ganyan. Or usually, parang oblong yung shape or spherical na shape. So, mga bilog-bilog, yan yung sperm nila. So, usually, one spermatium ay nare-release per one spermatangium. So, 1:1 yung ratio niyan. Meron din tayong usual na nangyayari na kung saan your spermatangium, siya yung nagbibigay buhay or siya yung nag-give rise dun sa spermatangial mother cell, just like in the spermatogenesis ng ating mga plants. So, kung makikita natin dito, we have a different stages in the production or the release of your spermatium or the release of your sperm. No? Parang sperm. Yeah, spermatium yung tawag natin. But meron siyang stepwise process dyan. Kung makikita nyo, yung spermatangium natin, ang unang mangyayari dyan, yung loob niya, magkakaroon siya ng loss of certain organelles. So, yung mga organelles niya, yung mga nutrients na nasa loob din niya, madidegrade or mawawala ng paunti-unti. So, yun yung development niyan. Tapos ang mangyayari, yung cell wall niya, itong cell wall niya, mag-degrade ng paunti-unti, magkakaroon ng changes, pati yung kanyang buong cell, no, mag-undergo ng certain changes. Yung loob niya, magkakaroon ng gelatinization, mag-gelatinize or, magkakaroon ng gelatinization yung loob niya. Then eventually, magkakaroon ka ng dito, yan, nag-gelatinize na yung cell wall mo na unti-unti na siyang nasisira-sira. Yung mga pit connection, ito yung sinabi kong pit connection, they will rupture. So, pag nag-rupture siyang ganyan, no, itong pit connection na to, pag nag-rupture to, para kang mag-ano ng pressure kung saan mag-ano yung mucilage dito, no? Para parang tawag dito, magpo-pour in yung mucilage dyan. Pag nag-rupture tong pit connection na to, the mucilage will come in, no? Or will come in or will get expanded. Minsan, your vacuole will also aggregate and form this very large vacuole here. At kapag nasira na nga yung pit connection, the mucilage will get will expand and essentially mapupush out yung ating baby spermatium outside dun sa nag-gelatinize na wall of your spermatangium. So 1:1, di ba? One spermatangium, one spermatium na ma-release. Now, in terms of the fertilization process na nangyayari, so, yan, sexual reproduction pa rin yung pinag-uusapan natin. In terms of fertilization, ayan siya. We have your spermatangia, madaming spermatangia. So, 1:1, mag-release ng spermatia. Yung spermatia na to, didikit dun sa ating, di ba, dun sa carpogonium natin, meron kang trichogyne. Yan yung carpogonium mo. Dun siya didikit. Once dumikit siya doon, no, dun sa ating trichogyne, dun sa mahabang yon ng ating carpogonium, ayan, magkakaroon siya ng changes sa loob niya. Kung saan mag-release siya ng mga actin filaments. Ayan, may mga actin filaments ka na dyan. So, sinulat ko pa ulit. Pinalaki ko lang. So, itong mga actin filaments na to, essentially para itong mga contractile proteins. They will serve as the contractile proteins here. And what will happen is, it will kind of pull out yung, magkakaroon, syempre, madidissolve muna yung, para magkakaroon ng butas dito. No? Tapos, somehow, it will pull out yung first nucleus natin, and then it will also pull out your second nucleus. Yung first nucleus mo will go down in your trichogyne. Yung isa naman is will move up your trichogyne, and then mag-fuse sila dito eventually. So, ganun yung fertilization na nangyayari. Again, para kang may male at para kang may female, no? Yung female mo, yung carpogonium, yung male mo, yung spermatanggia, yung male mo, yung spermatia or yung spermatium, yung female mo is yung carpogonium nga. So, para siyang pollination din, ha? Yun yung tignan nyo dito, guys. Para na siyang may pollination event na nangyayari, na may fertilization ka pa. Para kang may pollen talaga. Ganun ka-advanced and ka-divergent ang mga rhodophytes natin. Now, in your fertilization, no, once there is that fertilization event that occurred, it will usually stimulate the production of what we call polyamine spermine. So this polyamine spermine will steer the carpogonial branch towards the production of, so kapag, di ba, nag-fertilize na, nag-fuse na yung ating mga nucleus, yung ating spermatia dun sa carpogonium mo, sa loob ng carpogonium mo na may nucleus, what will happen is mag-release ng parang chemical signal, your polyamine spermine. Pag na-release yan, yung carpogonial branch mo, magde-develop siya into what we call, ayan siya dito, ang tawag natin dyan is carposporophyte. So this is your carposporophyte right here, itong entire structure na to. So si carposporophyte, siya, sa loob niya, no, sa loob ng carposporophyte natin, magkakaroon ka ng development of this carpospores. No, kapag nag-fertilize na, nag-release to, check, may polyamine spermine ka, it will stimulate the production of carpospores, itong mga darkened structure na yan, that's your carpospores, inside your carposporophyte. No? Hindi na siya kanina, di ba, ang tawag natin sa kanya, carpogonium, hindi na. No? After the fertilization event, carposporophyte na yung tawag natin. Kasi, di ba, pag carpogonium, N pa yun. Pag carposporophyte, 2N na yan. Okay ba? So, just like your higher plants, kung saan yung flowers mo, di ba? Yung flowers mo at yung, di ba, yung mga fruits mo, at yung, essentially yung flowers mo na may stamen, may antheridia, may oogonia, may ganyan-ganyan, di ba? Kung may plant, may flowers ka, may plant ka, may flower, di ba? Itong portion na to ay diploid 2N. Itong flower, or yung certain parts ng flower natin, that's N. Diba? Kasi siya yung nagpo-produce ng gamit. So, parang ganun din dito. But this time, ito, yan yung gametophyte natin. Siya yung N. Okay? Siya yung gametophyte. At ito yung ating 2N. No? Itong anong to, siya yung 2N na organism. So, parang siyang nag-switch-switch kasi nga may alternation of generation tayo. Iba lang yung format sa kanila, no? But technically, just like in your plants, in higher plants, yung gametophyte mo dito, parasite siya nung sporophyte mo. Nung mother tree. Yung flowers, yung mga parts ng flowers mo. Diba? Dito naman, yung carposporophyte mo, siya naman yung parasite nung gametophyte mo. Okay ba yun? Diba? Mind blown. Now, there is also this what we call cystocarp. When we say cystocarp, ito na yung kanina lang din, no? Na interaction ng carposporophyte natin with your gametophyte here. So, their interaction with each other is entirely parasitic, meaning they are entirely, the cystocarp or your carposporophyte is entirely reliant on the nutrients from your gametophyte, no? So reliant itong entire structure na to ni cystocarp dito dun sa mother gametophytic cells natin dito. So yeah, sabi niya dito, it's entirely a nutrient driven interaction between your carposporophyte and your vegetative gametophytic cells. And this formation of your fruiting bodies, your cystocarp, and whether there is a difference in the number of your carpogonial branch or entirely the presence or absence of your cystocarps is used in the taxonomic identification of the most member of your rhodophytes. So kung tingnan natin to, meron din tayong formation. So ito na, further down the line, there's this formation of different meiosporangia and meiospore in your rhodophytes. Okay, so ano itong meiosporangia, meiospore na to? So ganito lang nyo isipin to. So meron tayong tatlong klase, tetra, poly, bisporangia. Sa tetrasporangia, meron kang zonate yung tawag, so para siyang tetrasporangia, so ibig sabihin apat na parang spore. So either zonate siya, cruciate, cruise-like, no? Or tetrad. So that's your tetrasporangia. Si polysporangia, more than 4. So para siyang aggregate ng mga spores. Mga meiospores to. Meron naman kay bisporangia. So again, lagyan natin tetra, poly, bisporangia. So ganito nyo na lang siya i-familiarize yung sarili nyo. Yung bisporangia, dalawang spore. So ganun lang siya, no? More than 4, poly, bi, dalawa lang. Na-reduce siya. Okay? Tapos, yung tetrasporangia, yun yung iba-iba. Na may zonate, may cruciate form, tetrahedral form. So, bakit natin binabanggit to? Ba't natin pinag-uusapan yung mga tetrasporangia, yung mga sporangia na to? Kasi, meron kang triphasic life cycle. But not every member has that triphasic life cycle. So usually, meron ka lang alternation of generation like this one in your Hymeniura frondosa. Pagpasensyahan nyo na yung kanyang capitalization. So meron ka alternation of generation kung saan meron kang haploid generation at meron kang diploid generation right here. So mapapansin nyo, you have in your haploid generation, you have your gametophyte female plant and your gametophyte male plant. Okay? So, syempre, produkto yan ng meiosis. Okay? And your, these two will go into further development and will produce your spermatia and your, ayan, kung makikita nyo, madami siya dito. No? Madaming, may sterile cells ka, may procarp ka, supporting cells, carpogonial branch, may carpogyne siya. But essentially, meron kang isang central cell sa gitna at siya yung parang egg mo. So that's your carpogonium, no? Siya yung nag-produce ng mga yan. And magmi-meet yung male and female part na yan. Male, female, mag-fuse siya together and it will form your what we call the cystocarps. Your cystocarp, ito yung cross-section niya para siyang fruiting bodies talaga. At dun sa fruiting bodies na to, dun magfo-form yung tinatawag nating yung mga baby. Mga baby carpospores, no? Yung carpospores na 'yon, siya yung magi-give rise dun sa tinatawag nating tetrasporophyte. So yung tetrasporophyte na 'yan, pwede siyang yung tetrasporophyte na 'yan, yung tinawag natin kanina na pwede siyang apat na ganito lang, pwede siyang poly, 'di ba? Pwedeng bi. So yan, depende sa organism mo. But essentially, 2N, itong entire generation na to ay 2N at itong generation na to ay N. Okay? So, mas maganda siguro ma-visualize nyo siya in this life cycle table right here. Kung saan meron kang triphasic na life cycle. So, sa triphasic life cycle, again, bakit nga ba meron silang triphasic life cycle? Kasi nga immotile yung kanilang sperm. At dahil immotile yung sperm nila, to compensate, they have to do this triphasic life cycle. Now, the reasoning behind the triphasic life cycle is that since wala nga silang flagellated motile sperm, they need to be very efficient at medyo kailangan gradual din yung paunti-unti nila gagawin yung kanilang life cycle to ensure efficiency in fertilization. Okay? So, ito yung gametophyte, carposporophyte, yan yung usually tatlo, at yung tetrasporophyte. Okay? So, gametophyte, that's number 1. Carposporophyte, that's number 2. Tetrasporophyte, that's number 3. That's why it's triphasic. Now, in terms of the N-ness of your organism, this is N, this is haploid, this is 2N, this 2 here, this is 2N, this is diploid. Why is that important? Because as you can see here, andyan na yung mga binabanggit natin kanina. Meron kang tetrasporophyte. Siya yung magpuproduce ng tetrasporangium. Magpuproduce siya ng tetraspore. Pero hindi lagi tetraspore. Pwede kang dalawa lang, di ba? Pag dalawa, anong tawag natin? Anong tawag natin pag dalawa? Maalala nyo ko ba? Bisporangia. Pag mas madami sa 4, polysporangia. Pag 4 lang, tetrasporangium. Pag ganito yung arrangement, zonate, may cruciate ka, may cruciate form ka, mukhang ganyan yung itsura niya. May tetrad ka na form. Yung para kang box, tetrahedral form. So your tetrasporangium will produce that tetraspore. And then, itong tetraspore na to, siya na yung magpuproduce yung isa dyan, mag-give rise dun sa gametophyte plant. Yung gametophyte mo, may male and female. Hindi lagi siya dun sa isa. So, yung male, siya yung, male, no? Air mark quotation. Siya yung magpuproduce ng spermatangium. 1 spermatangium equals 1 spermatium. Yung spermatium na napoproduce ng spermatangium mo, didikit dun sa trichogyne ng ating carpogonium. May mga basal cells ka dyan. And then, pag nag-fuse na sila dito, no, nagkaroon na ng mga event, nag-fuse yung nuclei nila, magpuproduce yan ng carposporophyte. Yung carposporophyte mo, pwedeng hindi siya agad carposporophyte or yung tinatawag natin siyang gonimoblast. Mamaya i-explain natin yan. But essentially, yung carposporophyte mo, siya yung magpuproduce ng carpospores. Si carpospores, lalaki siya, and magpuproduce siya ng tetrasporangium natin, and so on and so forth. So, madami siyang komplikasyon. So, ganito yung kanyang itsura sa totoong buhay. Ayan, ganyan siya. Ito yung typical life cycle of a Pleuridiopiceae or a Pleuridophyte or a red algae. So, you have a gametophyte. Okay, you have a gametophyte. You have a carposporophyte. You have a tetrasporophyte. Hanapin nyo lang yung tatlong yon kasi nga triphasic. Your gametophyte will produce the gametes. Si spermatium ay mapuproduce sa spermatangia. So, mapuproduce ka ng spermatia or spermatium. So, mga non-motile, circular to oblong na mga sperm yan. So, that's your male. Your female is your carpogonium. So, si carpogonium, meron siyang trichogyne here. Diyan magpupuse yung spermatium. And then, with their union, that will form your syngamy, the union of these nuclei, they're both nuclei, will form now your 2N. So, this is N, 2N. Okay? So, 2N, N, ayan, nag-form sila. Pag nag-ano na yan, may mga carpospores ka na dyan. Ang tawag na natin dyan is the cystocarp. Right? Or yung fruiting bodies natin. Pero, ang tawag, mas magandang tawag dyan is the carposporophyte. Si carposporophyte ay sporophyte din talaga. No? Nagkaroon ka lang ng carpo na additional. But essentially, sporophyte yan. Yung sporophyte na yan, ay parasitic siya dun sa mother gametophyte plant, di ba? Kasi dun siya nagpo-form para siyang fruits na parasite. siya yung magpuproduce ng carpospore. Si carpospore, pag na-release, magpo-form ng tetrasporophyte. Si tetrasporophyte siya magpuproduce ng tetraspores, no? Siyempre, yung tetrasporangium niya yun. Tetraspores magde-develop into your gametophyte. There are also those organisms, so still under reproduction, but this time, asexual naman yung type of reproduction. These organism naman ay hindi na nag-i-involve ng meiosis at hindi na nag-i-involve ng fusion of gametes. So for example, meron tayong mga monosporangia type ng sexual reproduction kung saan nagpo-produce ng one spore per one sporangium. Meron naman tayong mga parasporangia type of red algae na nagpo-produce ng greater than one na spore per one sporangium. So sporangium, nagpo-produce lang ng mga spore sa loob. Pag 1:1, monosporangia. Pag 1:many, parasporangia. And the spore, in terms of spore motility, we have the monospore, tetraspore, or carpospores. These are entirely non-motile type of spores. Ibig sabihin, no flagella. So, what type of movement can they do? They can't do shit. They can't do nothing. No? Ang type of movement nila ay through gliding lang, through mucus secretion or through secretion of polysaccharide. So, yung spore mo, para maagalaw, magsisecrete siya ng mga mucilage or polysaccharide para kumapit siya at somehow makagalaw ng paunti-unti. So, hindi siya talaga motile. Limited yung kanyang spore motility. Now, moving on to the Rhodophytian phylogeny and taxonomy, let's first rewind and remind ourselves with this figure right here. Again, if we are having a checklist of the different algae that we have encountered in our course, we have to check your cyanophytes, which is not here because they are the one that has that plastid, so hindi sila naka-highlight dito. But we have your glaucophytes, your chlorophytes that we discussed earlier, and the charophytes na although divergent or technically distinct from your chlorophytes, they are still clustered together and mas related siya or mas close relatives of your land plants. So let's check your land plants too. Now, for this lecture, we are now going to discuss the different taxa under your red algae. And for the next chapter, we'll be discussing your brown algae, diatoms, and pelagophytes, although we're going to focus on your phaeophytes only. Now, your chloracneophytes, your apicomplexas, your dinoflagellates, and your euglenids, plus your haptophytes and your cryptomonads are, for now, are still, let's just put them on a gray area in the evolution of the origin and those serial to secondary endosymbiosis. Let's just lump them into that category for now. Okay, now let's go to your history of the taxonomy or phylogeny of your rhodophytes, of your red algae. Well, in the most traditional view of your phylogeny of red algae, your rhodophyte is subdivided at least in just two groups. We have your Chloridiopisceae and your Bangiophyceae, which includes your Bangiales, your Porphyridiales, or your two groups or three groups of Porphyridiales, your Composugnales, your Rhodochaetales, yung mga yan, pati si Cynadiales. But in the earlier 2004 version of Saunders and Homer Sands, they updated this to incorporate the morphological difference of your most unicellular and multicellular rhodophytes. So they lumped this into at least, if I'm not mistaken, at least two groups. So these are the more multicellular, and this group right here is the more at least unicellular in nature. So multicellular groupings, unicellular groupings. But the more recent publication of Yoon et al. In 2006, they used different molecular evidences to create this division of your rhodophyte into these different order or groups. So we have your Floridiopiceae, your Bangiophyceae, Rhodeliophyceae, Porphyridio, Stylonematopiceae, Compogonophyceae, Cyanidiopiceae. So at least 7 groupings in terms of the molecular evidences. Although in these uh, molecular evidences, they found out that your Floridiopiceae and your Bangiophyceae, these two groups, are the more divergent ones among the groupings, or they more or less cluster together, and they are maybe the ones that earlier diverge from the group. So para siyang, in this sense of Yoon et al. And publication of Yoon et al. 2006, they are the crown group of your rhodophytes. Okay, so yeah, according to Yoon et al., you have at least 2 groupings. We have the Rhodophytina, plus the classes that we mentioned earlier, plus your subphylum Cyanidophytina. So with just one class, Cyanidiopiceae. So yeah, according to Yoon et al. In 2006, we have at least 2 groupings. The first group is your Cyanidiopiceae, Cyanidiopitina, and the next group is your Rhodophytina, including your more common representatives of your red algae, including the class Bangiophyceae, Compso, Pugonaphyceae, and your much more important class Floridiopiceae and your Porphyridiophyceae right there. That's the more diverse and more important taxonomic groupings. But when you look at the catalog of life, so this is the most authoritative taxonomic database out there. If you look at it and you search Rhodophyta, there's still a lot of phylum or order that is not assigned to a class or to a subphylum. But there's at least 4 subphylums. We have your Cyanidophytina, Urhodophytina, your Metarhodophytina, your Rhodeliophytina. So, andyan pa rin naman yung mga distinct lineages, that we mentioned earlier, your Cyanidiopiceae, your Bangiophyceae, Floridiopiceae, that again, clustered together. So they are the divergent ones, the earlier divergent ones that we mentioned. And your Compsognathophyceae is also here, and it's a monophyletic clade, where we have your Porphyridiophyceae right here, together with your Rhodeliophyceae and Stylonematopiceae right here, plus other ones that still unranked up to this date. So yeah, that's according to the catalog of life, and I just want to show you this one. So again, what I'm showing you here is the percentages of the different orders or different species that you can find in your Rhodophytan lineages. So again, the majority is coming from your Floridiopiceae and from your Cryptonemiales. So that's why we're going to spend considerable amount of time in this Floridiopicean lineage right here, other than this portion right here. So that's your Corallinales, Halimediales, your Cyrimiales, all those Floridiopicean lineage. So we'll see that later. So first one, we have your order Cyanidiales. Again, in this portion right here, right off the bat, I want to say that we are no longer following the more, taxonomically refined position when discussing your Rhodophycean lineage. We're targeting it directly to the orders that are more important. I feel is more important for our discussion. So we have your order Cyanidiales right here. Most of your orders Cyanidiales are unicellular in nature. They are the ones that you can find in volcanic areas with high pH value ranging from 0.5 to 3 pH, so very acidic environment. So you can consider them as extremophile or acidophile in this case. They are consisted of these three taxa. So they have three extant species right here. We have your Cyanidium caldarum, Cyanido schizon, merole, Galderia sulphuraria. So all of these are found in uh, volcanic areas with very low pH values. So again, as you can see here, they have a stellated or a stellate type of plastid. And when we have a stellate type of plastid, usually this is a more of a primitive, again, let's quote that, primitive type of plastid. So again, they are of kind of like your cyanobacteria, no? Ganun yung kulay nila in color. Next is your order Porphyridiales. This order is also an interesting one because it is composed of unicellular to multicellular representative that is usually held using mucilaginous secretion of your cell. There is a difference in their forms. Some are single branch, some has stellate plastids that has with or without pyrenoid. Again, as you can see here, we have different representative, your Porphyridium, Rhodosaurus, Rhodelia, SP. So your Porphyridium, as you can see here, it has a stellate type of plastid. Again, this is a more primitive version of plastid. We have your Rhodella, again, also having a stellate type of plastid. And your Rhodelia, SP, which is also a unicell, but this time it has a discoid type of plastid, which is more advanced. Yeah, it's an advanced form of plastid. So your order Porphyridiales, again, they are multicellular. As you can see here, their multicellular nature is held, or their multicellular form is held by that thick mucilaginous secretion right there, the thick mucilage holding those cells inside it. So that's your Porphyridiales with your Asterocystis and Gynotrichum right here, Goniotrichum. Again, these are multicellular organisms. Now, for your order Bangiales, this is a unique order under your Rhodophyceae since they have your filamentous base and a more macroscopic base. So, as you can see here, we have two different cytomorphological structure. We have your macroscopic base right here with no pit connection, and we have your filamentous base right here with pit connections. So this is the sporophyte, meaning it is the 2N individual. So this is filamentous in nature. So mga filaments yan na again, yung filaments mo, meron kang pit connection, di ba? Yung iba't ibang klase ng pit connection natin. And your sporophyte is 2N or diploid. Your gametophyte, this one right here, which is the more macroscopic base of the organism. So this macroscopic base of the organism is the one that is a haploid. So this is the gametophyte. So this is the case of your, so this organism right here is your Porphyra, the type organism for your order Bangiales. So yeah, you have a gametophyte and you have a sporophyte. Now, the presence of pit is, again, if you remember earlier what I said, is the presence of this pit right here. The absence or presence of pit usually denotes primitiveness or advancement in terms of the evolutionary status of the individual. And in this case, when you have a pit connection, that's more advanced. When you don't have the pit connection, it is less advanced or primitive. So, but for the case of this Porphyra, you can't really say if it's advanced or not advanced because the sporophyte base has a pit connection while your gametophyte base has no pit connection. So para siyang halfway there. But yeah, you will learn later on that when you have a pit connection, usually that is the advanced, the more advanced version. When you have, we don't have a pit connection, that's a primitive. So yeah, that's your filamentous base of your Porphyra sp. Now, the in terms of the cycle, no? The life cycle of your order Bangiales, it is very simple. You have a haploid and you have a diploid base right here. Your diploid base is composed of your so it's composed of your carpospore that will grow and it will create your conchosporangium right here. Your conchospore will germinate into your this leafy thallus right here. So this germination of your conchospore will lead to the development of a very leafy thallus. So this leafy thallus right here, as you can see here, the one that doesn't have any pit connection, so this leafy thallus can continue to reproduce asexually. So it will only produce monospores, and this monospore will become a rhizoid, and it will become a leafy thallus, and again will complete its life cycle in that way. But in terms of its reproductive cycle, it can also, so this portion right here is an asexual sexual phase of your organism. This portion right here is the sexual phase of your organism. So in your sexual phase, your thallus can develop a spermatia and a carpogonium. So again, your spermatia, your spermatogonia, spermatium, no, those spermatium that is released will unite with your carpogonium. May trichogyne ka ulit, then mag-fertilization. After that fertilization, inside that carpogonium or the carposporophyte, you will develop the carpospores right here, and that those carpospores will develop into a monospores, and it will elongate, will develop the conchosporangium, conchospore, and so on and so forth. Now for your order Acrocatenales, so this is number 5. This one naman has a fully fledged tripasic life cycle. So fully fledged tripasic life cycle na si Acrocatenales. So this order of your red algae has a uniseriate filamentous gametophyte. So uniseriate lang yan na filamentous na gametophyte. And it also has a tetrasporophyte. Okay? Mostly, your order Acrocatenales are epiphytic in nature, and usually they can also grow inside or become endophytes of certain algae and certain plant species too. So we have 4 genera here: Rhodocorton, we have Acrocatium, Odonelia, and Cailinia. So in terms of their chloroplast, we have a stellate chloroplast here. We have a spiral chloroplast. We have a laminate chloroplast and a discoid chloroplast. So in terms of primitiveness, so parang pag ganito yung advancement nito. So more advanced yung discoid, yung stellate natin ay mas primitive. So parang ganyan yung trend in evolutionary sense. Again, this is a gradistic way of looking at it. But yeah, it's kind of cool to look at it. So my mnemonics here would be CAR. So mas primitive si Cailinia, mas advanced si Rhodocorton. So in terms of their life cycle, ganito naman yung itsura niya. Again, may tripasic na tayong life cycle. So as you can see here, i-define lang natin, we have the gametophyte, the carposporophyte, and the tetrasporophyte generation. Again, this follows the basic Floridian or Pleurophysian life cycle. So this is for the case of your Rhodocorton sp. So we can start at your gametophyte stage, your haploid stage, and then we can move on to your diploid stage here. So diploid stage natin, itong sporophyte. Pag tinitingnan ko to, sporophyte pa rin yung tingin ko sa nila, no? Doon sa dalawang to, sa carposporophyte at sa tetrasporophyte. Kasi sporophyte lang din naman sila. Although mas mas distinct kasi may tetra, may carpospore na form, cystocarps. Anyway, your gametophyte generation will again form the female, no, and the male. Although hindi talaga siya tawag na female and male. Carpogonium spermatangia yung tawag natin sa kanya. Yung carpogonium, meron siyang mga different formation here. Yung spermatangia natin magpuproduce ng spermatia or spermatium pupunta sa trichogyne. Didikit siya doon. Then carpogonium, pag nagkaroon ng syngamy, ng fusion, magpuproduce ka ng carposporophyte natin. Sa loob ng carposporophyte natin, di ba? Sa loob ng carposporophyte, magpo-form ka ng mga carpospores. Okay? But this time, hindi agad-agad siya didiretso into carposporangia. Yung carpogonium natin, kapag nag-fuse na sila, magkaroon pa ng, huwag nyo masyadong pansinin, pero magkakaroon pa ng iba't ibang steps here and will form your gonymoblast initials. Your gonymoblast will essentially turn into what I want you to learn here, gonymoblast will form your carposporangia. Your carposporangia, may carpospores ka dyan, at ma-release yung carpospores na yun. And these carpospores will form your tetrasporophyte. So magde-develop siya into tetrasporophyte right here. Meron kang tetrasporangium and mag-release ng tetraspores and the life cycle continue. So so kung makikita nyo, ang unique lang kay Acrocatinalis is your carpogonium ay hindi agad siya magiging carposporophyte or hindi agad siya magiging carposporangia. Magiging muna siyang gonymoblast cell, then magiging siyang fully fledged carposporophyte. So gonymoblast to carposporophyte, and then si carposporophyte mo sa loob niya may mga carpospores ka. Yung carpospores na yan i-release, magde-develop into your tetrasporophyte. May tetrasporangium ka, tetraspore. So, N to N. Tatlong portion, tetrasporophyte, gametophyte, carposporophyte. So, 1, 2, 3. Now, moving on with your order, Batrachospermales. Your Batrachospermales naman, this is the more unique order of your Rhodophyte kasi sila lang yung exclusive, they are one of the order that are exclusively found in freshwater environment. So, red algae na freshwater environment mo sila makikita. So, they have this uniaxial or one apical cell per branch type of growth, thus resulting to what we call a kasi nga dahil uniaxial siya, so parang isang plane lang yung division. That's why yung ating mga species or representative under your Batrachospermales has a cylindrical thallus. So just like your Acrocatinales, cylindrical. Just like in your Acrocatinales, your Batrachospermales also has a triphasic life cycle. So, ang isa natin, katulad din ni Acrocatinales, they form gonymoblast from your carpogonium. So, carpogonium magpo-form ng gonymoblast. Gonymoblast magpo-form ng the full-fledged carposporophyte. Ang representative species natin dito is your Batrachospermum sp. So, ito siya, no, sa freshwater habitat. Now, your gonymoblast is also a distinct characteristic found in your acrocatinales and also in your batrachospermales. Usually, yung gonimoblast na to, they develop from your carpogonium, but they usually form, no, when the spermatium and the carpogonium, the nucleus inside the carpogonium, fertilizes itself. No? Kapag nag-meet yung spermatium natin at yung cell dun sa loob ng carpogonium natin, no? Pag nagkaroon ng fertilization event, nagkaroon ka ng zygotic nucleus, you will form the gonimoblast. Then your gonimoblast will then form your may carposporophyte ka, di ba? Sa loob ng carposporophyte mo, mayroon ka mga carpospores. You have carpospores there. Now, tingnan natin yung life cycle ng ating batrachospermales. So, titingnan natin yung kanyang life cycle. Ganito yung kanyang itsura. Again, simulan natin sa gametophyte. That's number 1. Carposporophyte is number 2. And then, your tetrasporophyte. Right here. Okay. So this entire area right here, again, is 2n. This area right here is n. Now, as you can see here, bilisan lang natin. Simulan natin kay gametophyte. May carpogonium, may antheridia, magre-release or tawag dito, spermatangium, magre-release ng spermatium, no? Didikit yung spermatium dun sa kay carpogonium mo, mag-fuse, but magkakaroon ka muna ng gonimoblast here, then magkakaroon ng fertilization event, forming now your carposporangium. Yung sa loob ni carposporangium, or sa carposporophyte natin, no? Carposporangium, magfo-form ka ng carpospores. Yung mga carpospores na to ay magfo-form ng diploid. Magiging muna siyang prothallus na ganyan, but eventually magiging siyang itong ganito na diploid. Meron kang diploid thallus. Lalaki to eventually at mag-release ng monospore, at yung monospore na yan ay magde-develop into this large plant right here. So this is the sporophyte generation, no? This is the sporophyte. So yan yung sporophyte mo. Tapos so yan, para siyang filaments, no? Pag tinignan nyo sa tawag dito, sa microscope, mukha siyang ganito. So parang may ganyan. Tapos may mga filaments ka, di ba? So that's your sporophyte. So yeah, sporophyte, yun siya. Tapos minsan sa gitna, hindi lang sa tips, no? Hindi lang sa tip na ganito. Sa gitna din nung ating sporophyte, dyan yung ma-form yung gametophyte mo. Okay, so again, si gametophyte ay parang parasite ng ating sporophyte here. So, para na siyang plant, no? Kasi mas maliit yung gametophyte mo dito. Yung mga, yeah. Okay? So, that's your batrachospermales. Now, moving on with the more refined class, Floridiophyceae. Ito na yung mas exciting portion ng mga rhodophytes. So, tingnan natin yung basic characteristics ng mga class Floridiophyceae. They are usually filamentous and branching in nature. Their cells are linked through what we call pit connections. And again, pag may pit connection, that is a more advanced character in terms of evolutionary history. They have a triphasic life history, and it includes many order na mas kilala sa science, which is your Nemaliales, kasi mas economically important ang mga to, your Corallinales, yung mga hard algae natin, red algae natin, Gelidiales, Gracillariales, and yung ating Ceramiales. Yeah, ayun din si Halimenia mo, si Girgitanales mo, yung Buneman Soniales natin kasama din dyan. So, tingnan natin, magsimula tayo dun sa order Nemiales. So, yung order Nemiales natin, so hindi natin lahat i-discuss, yung mga importanteng portion lang, will focus on that. So, your order Nymaliales has unlike your Batrachus spermales, no? Yung order Nymaliales natin has a multi-axial type of growth. So, anong ibig sabihin natin pag may, di ba, kanina, uniaxial, so isang apical, division, parang ganun. And your multi-axial, since multi-axial siya, it has more than one apical cell per branch, yung hindi siya cylindrical yung cell mo. Usually, ang resulting growth pattern or habit pattern that we can see here is a more complex talus na mas madaming branches at mas nodular siya or para siyang creeping form na parang yan, kung may bato ka man dito, ganyan yung mga itsura niya. Dahil dyan sa multi-axial na type of its growth form or, well, germinative part. So, more complex talus. Meron din silang gonimoblast na nagde-develop muna from your carpogonium. Usually, they are soft, shiny, and lubricous. So, yun yung main characters ng mga Nymaliales natin. They have, nabanggit natin kanina, they have a certain degree of calcification, some representative. Okay? So, their talus can also be cylindrical and dichotomously branched. May makikita natin mga genera under this. And yung mga representatives natin is your Trichoglea, Liogoropsis, Yamadilea, and Liagora. Meron tayo nito dun sa mga collections natin sa lab. Like Liagora, for example. You can look it up there. Ngayon, tignan natin yung life cycle niya ng mga order Nymaliales. So, ganito yung simple lang yung life cycle mo. Meron kang parang, pwede mo din siya ma-divide into 3 section, no? Triphasic naman kasi siya. We have a triphasic life history. So, kung titignan natin dito, we have your gametophyte generation right here. So, ibig sabihin, this is an N. And this 2 right here is your 2N. So, siya yung parang sporophyte. But this one, siya yung mako-consider nating tetrasporophyte. This one naman, you can consider it the carposporophyte. Again, yung progression nung development natin, carpospores, marirelease, magsimula tayo sa gametophyte, meron kang male, female, magdidikit, spermatia, mag-form ng gonimoblast. Yung gonimoblast, sa loob niya, may gonimoblast filament ka, mag-form ng carpospores. Carpospores ma-release, mag-form ng tetrasporophyte. Yung sa tetrasporangium, mag-release ng tetraspores. Mag-form yung tetraspores na to, magiging siyang ganyan. And eventually, dun sa lateral portions niya, ay may ganitong forms, no? Na meron kang male and female portion. So, ganun lang siya kasimple. Punta na agad tayo kay Corallinales. Isa din under your Floridiophyceae. Ito naman, yung, di ba, kasunod lang din ni Nymaliales. They are the ones that are heavily calcified. So, madami kang deposition ng calcium carbonate within their cell wall. So, they also have what we call your conceptacles. Pag sinabi natin conceptacles naman, this is in a way, pag may nakita kang conceptacles in your algae, usually that's a sign that this is a more primitive type of reproduction, sexual reproduction. Kasi ang conceptacle na yan, ano siya? Well, yung conceptacle, kung i-imagine niyo siya, parang siyang ganito lang, ayan. So, ayan yung conceptacle mo. So, para siyang receptacle, pero conceptacle siya dito. Sa loob ng conceptacle natin, it's just a cavity inside your talus, di ba? Kung maalala mo yung mga gemma cup, para siyang ganun, no? But itong conceptacle na to, well, it's a primitive form of sexual reproduction, but inside it is your reproductive organ. So, nasa loob niyan yung reproductive organ mo. Mapa-female siguro or male portion. So, may dalawa kang covering ng conceptacle mo. So, meron kang tinatawag nating peritalus. So this is the one right here. Pag sinabi nating peritallus, this is the thallus that surrounds your conceptacle. So yan si peritallus. So surround siya dun sa conceptacle. Yung hypothallus naman natin, siya usually yung thallus na below your conceptacle. So ganyan lang yung form na meron tayo under your corallinales. Your corallinales is also known for being one of the most hardest red algae. Okay, sila yung matitigas na red algae. Kaya sila corallinales, no? Hard. Matitigas talaga itong mga to. Now, there are two subfamilies of your corallinales. So, meron tayong Melobisoidea at Corallinoidea. So, Corallinoidea, ganito yung itsura nila. Yung Melobisoidea natin, ganito yung itsura nila. Yung mga Melobisoidea natin, usually sila yung nagfo-form ng crustose at nodular form. Pag sinabi natin crustose, meron kang kumari bato, yan yung bato mo, para siyang magfo-form ng mga, nagkikrip siya dun sa entire bato mo, or pwede siyang mag-form ng mga nodes. No? Kung may bato ka, pwede siyang mag-creep dyan sa bato mo at mag-form ng para siyang covering. Or pwede siyang, kung may bato ka man, mag-form ng mga bilog-bilog na ganyan, mga nodes. Nodular siya or crustose in form. So, ganyan yung itsura niya. At ganito yung itsura ng kanyang conceptacle, yung nakita natin kanina. Pero yung cases ng mga Corallinoidea, ito yung makikita nyo din sa laboratory natin. Most Corallinoidea, under your corallinales, ganito naman yung itsura. Meron kang articulations, no? Articulated siya or jointed siya. So, parang medyo pangit itong tignan eh. Huwag nyo itong imaginein. Mas magandang imaginein nyo yung sa case ng Jania, kung na-encounter nyo na sa mga pictures natin sa laboratory, yung Jania, SP, at yung Actinotrichia, for example. These are heavily calcified red algae. Ganito talaga yung itsura nila. So, para siyang mga puno, no? Na ayan. Tapos, branch. Parang ganyan yung itsura niya. So, you get the point. So, parang ganun siya. Tapos, medyo reddish white yung kulay ng mga to. Kasi calcified siya, tapos calcified na red algae. So, ayan, parang ganito din, no? Pero mas ganito yung itsura makikita nyo sa laboratory natin. So, si Jania, si Atrinotrichia sp, ganyan yung mga itsura nila. Minsan, lalo na Calojania at Atrinotrichia, yung mga segments niya, yan, kuwari ito yung segment, lalo na yung dulong portion, meron kang annular rings or parang may mga rings na form. So, kuwari ito yung tip, may mga rings ka dyan na makikita at pwede nyo magamit yon for taxonomic identification. Again, so yan yung ating subfamilies under your Corallinaceae, Melobisoidea at Corallinoidea. Now, moving on with your order Gelidiales. Ganito naman yung itsura ng ating mga Gelidiales. Sila Gelidiales, isang pinakaano dyan ay si Gelidiella. So, si Gelidiella is an example of your fleshy agarophytes. Ibig sabihin, fleshy na red algae lang yan. At sila yung mas madaming portion, no, ng kanilang mucilage ay gawa sa dun sa mga Amorphous caraginan and Amorphous agar. So yeah, sila Gelidiella ay meron siyang carpogonial branch that consists of, yan, tandaan nyo to, single cell carpogonium at wala siyang differentiated axillary cells. Okay, so meron siyang one cell carpogonium. So meron kang carpogonium dyan, pero isang cell lang yan. No, isang cell lang yung carpogonium mo na to na magpuproduce ng carposporophyte natin. Okay? So, one cell lang sa kanya, yung kanyang carpogonium. Yung iba mas madami, di ba? Yung carpogonium natin. So, sa kanya, isang cell lang, magde-develop doon yung carposporophyte. Now, moving on with your order Gracillariales. So sa order Gracilariales, again, katulad ni Gelidiales, your Gracilariales are also fleshy agarophytes. So fleshy agarophytes, hindi sila calcified like your Corallinales, but they are also source of precious agars and your Caraginans. So your order Gracilariales, unlike your Gelidiales, they have two-cell carpogonial branch naman dito. And again, no auxiliary cells. Ang mga representative genera natin is your Gracilaria, Eucuma, Capopicus, Hypnea, Acanthopora, Laurasia, Amancia, Portiera. Itong mga to, lahat ito ay ma-encounter natin sa lab. So, hindi ko na isa-isahin sila, pero gusto ko nang ma-prime kayo na itong mga to, na importanteng representative under your Gracilariales are all found in the lab. Baka makita nyo din na ma-encounter sila in our laboratory exam. Pinaka nalilito ko dyan, ito is itong dalawang to, Hypnea and Acanthopora. At si Laurentia din, medyo magkakamukha yan. Yung ito, lalo na to. Itong tatlong to, na-interchange to karimitan ng mga estudyante. Yung kung Gracilaria ba siya, or Eucuma, or Capopicus. At kalimitan din kasi, mga synonymous yung ibang mga genus dito eh. Ibig sabihin, magkakamukha sila or hindi pa siya taxonomically accepted, no, na distinct genus, for example. So, yung nahihirapan kahit yung mga trained na mga tao, no, or ng mga expert dito. So, in your order Gracilariales, we have again a tripasic form of life history. So, we can see here, we can divide it into three. We have your gametophyte. So, 1, carposporophyte, 2, tetrasporophyte, 3. Ganun lang din, no? Simpleng-simple lang din. Again, these two is the 2N. This is the N, the gametophyte. So, meron kang female, male, syempre female, carpogonium. Yung isa ay spermatium. Magpuproduce siya ng spermatia, didikit. Then magfuse together, magpo-form ng fusion cell. Itong fusion cells na to, no? So meron kang carpogonium, 'di ba? Carpogonium 'yan. Si carpogonium mo eventually magdi-develop into your gonimoblast. So magiging mo siyang gonimoblast. Pag nagkaroon na ng fusion ng cell directly, magdi-develop na siya into carposporangia. Tapos meron kang cystocarp wall here. Yung mag-develop sa loob ni carposporangia is yung mga carpospores natin na magre-release ng disc-like carposporophyte. Carpospores. Yung mga carpospores na to magde-develop eventually at magsasettle, maggagawa siya ng mga tetrasporophyte natin na magpuproduce ng tetrasporangium and then tetraspore, and then yung tetraspores mo mag-germinate into your female and male, and eventually the life cycle will continue. Now, the last one, the last but not the least order that we have here is your order Ceramyales. So, your order Ceramyales is a relatively, sila yung sa lahat ng mga red algae, sila yung relatively delicate or filamentous na mga order of red algae. They have what we call an auxiliary cell that is usually cut off after the fertilization of your carpogonium with your spermatia. Okay, and usually these auxiliary cell are born on the supporting cell of a 4-celled carpogonial branch. So from 1 cell to 2-celled to 4-celled carpogonial branch. So ano nga, baka nalilito ko ano yung mga carpogonial branch, di ba? Kung alalahanin niyo yung figure natin kanina, meron kang, ayan, may supporting cells ka. May mga cells kang ganyan, no? 3, 4. So, tapos, meron kang, ito yung carpogonium mo. So, carpogonium. Sino to? Trichogyne. Bala na kayo sa spelling. Carpogonium mo, may cell yan dyan. Meron kang, ito yung ating carpogonial branch. and then yung mga supporting cells natin. Okay? So yeah, nag-iiba-iba sila dun sa dami ng carpogonial cell, yung carpogonial branch, yung cell dun sa carpogonial branch nila. Yung isa kanina, isa lang, yung isa, dalawa lang, ito sa case natin dito, 4. Okay? So ganun-ganun yung mga differences ng mga order natin from your gracillariales, ceramiliales, and yung mas nauna natin kanina na one cell lang yung kanyang corpogonial branch, your order Gelidiales. So yun yung mga pagkakaiba-iba nila. So baka ma-encounter nyo lang during our exam, which order has this 4-celled, which order has this 2-celled carpogonial branch, yung mga ganyan. Okay. Now, tignan lang natin yung case ng ating Polycyponia. So si Polycyponia right here, under your order Ceramiales, has, again, a tribasic life cycle. You have your Gametophyte 1, Carposporophyte 2, Tetrasporophyte 3, 2N, and again, tetraspore will develop into the male, female, male, female. Ayan, kung makikita nyo, meron kang trichogyne, trichoblast, yung ating male part ay magpo-produce ng spermatangia, ayan. So, hindi pala siya andito pa yung portion ng spermatangia natin. And eventually, yung spermatangia na yan, magpo-fuse dun sa ganito, sa trichogyne natin. So, nagde-develop dito yung carpogonium. Ayan, may carpogonial branch ka dyan. And then, pag nag-fusion sila, mag-develop ka into cystocarp. But bago siya maging full-fledged na cystocarp or na carposporophyte, magkakaroon ka muna ng gonimoblast filament. Then after the complete fusion, magpo-form ka na ng cystocarp mo na pag ganito. Yan na yung full-fledged carposporophyte. Sa loob ng carposporophyte, magpo-form ka ng carpospores, yung mga carpospores sa loob. Eventually, ma-release yan. Si carpospore mag-develop into your this organism right here na magkakaroon ka ng tetrasporangium, kung ano mga form ng tetrasporangium yan, poly, tetra, or bisporangium, kung ano man yan, siya yung mag-release ng tetraspore eventually. But yeah, ganun lang yung species, Polycyponia species natin under order Ceramiales. And that's all for our lecture for today. I hope you have, I know it's a lot to take in, but just take a deep breath and remember you have, in terms of the life history, you always have your number 1, Gametophyte, your Carposporophyte, and your Tetrasporophyte. So, yun lang naman lagi yung nagsacycle. Sa exam, ngayon, nag-deep dive tayo, pinaisa-isa natin. But sa exam, hindi ko na kayo tatanungin nung entire process, o hindi ko papa-explain sa inyo the entire process of its life cycle, its life history. Kasi napaka-komplikado ng life history ng mga organism na ito. But I want you to picture them in a more general sense. Meaning, I want you to know that your Gametophytes is a haploid organism. Your Carposporophyte forms your cystocarp and is technically is a sporophyte generation. Therefore, it's a 2N organism. Your Tetrasporophyte is also a 2N organism. And your Carpospores is produced inside your Carposporangium or your cystocarp, yung mga ganyang mga bagay-bagay. So, in general terms nyo, silang reviewin, wag nyong i-deep dive ng sobra-sobra. In general terms nyo, tingnan. At ang mas importante siguro portion of the lecture is which organism exhibit which, and which organism has one cell type corpogonial branch, which organism has a 2-cell type corpogonial branch, which has 4, so on and so forth. The defining characteristics, I think, that's the more important portion right here. And with that being said, I will end our lecture for today. If you have any questions, just PM me and I will answer you. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. This is Sir Patrick. Peace out.